Welcome, my little couch potatoes, to the comfiest courtroom on the internet. I'm your host, Llama, and it's time for dramatic testimony, overruled objections, and absolutely unqualified opinions. So grab your snuggiest blanket, some delicious snacks, and get ready to watch court with your internet besties. This is Couch Court with Llama. Hello, and welcome to Couch Confessions, the coziest corner of the internet, where secrets spill, laughter echoes, and no topic is off limits. I'm your host, Llama, and this isn't your average interview show. Nope. We're kicking back on the couch, ditching the scripts, and diving deep into the stories that make us human. So grab a snack, get comfy, and prepare for some unfiltered honesty, unexpected twist, and maybe a little oversharing. This is Couch Court with Llama. Oh, Couch Confessions. What show am I doing again? Oh, there we go. Couch Confessions. It's been a long day. I've been up since 8:30. So why are we here today? Well, because I have a very special guest with us. Let's bring her up. It's Lady in Gray. Hello, welcome.
Hello.
Thank you for
Can you hear
being here. Yep, I can hear you
Okay.
just fine. You
Okay.
sound great. What day is it even? I don't know. So some of you have maybe seen Lady in Gray in the chat. She's one of our mods. She helps with a lot of research for us. She's amazing at what she does. But she is here to share with us about her jury experience, which I'm very excited to hear. Oh, look at that. Somebody says, I hope Dr. Spencer Reed makes an appearance.
Well, I think he might because he just walked through the room and talked to me. So he may jump up here in a minute. So we'll see.
He's going to be a celebrity. Well, thanks for joining us today, Lady in Gray, or Lig, as Elbow Feet and the rest of chat likes to call you now.
That's fine.
For sure. So why don't you tell us a little bit about, let's talk first about receiving a jury summons.
Okay.
What was that like?
Well, first I have to say that it was a couple of decades ago. Okay. And I think pretty much in my state, things have stayed the same because nobody who has had jury duty since mid to late 80s, that's how long ago it was, has said it's different. So you get them in the mail and certified, but you don't have to sign for them. It's just so they can say, I guess they delivered it. And at that time, they would say, you've been chosen. You need to call this telephone number. And because there's no cell phones back then, you didn't have the internet, check, nothing like that. You all landline and everything. And so you would call and it would say you're on panel A or B. That's how they would do it, divide it into two panels. And they would give you a day to call. And so every Tuesday you would call and they would say, we don't need panel B, call back. And it might be the next week before you'd have to call back.
That's interesting.
And so the session was for like 3 months. I think mine went from like September to the first part of December. So it was like 3.5 months. But I didn't even have to go until like the week before my last week.
Oh,
I mean, I was
I
was calling every week, and it's like I don't have time. And so when I did finally have to go, I was like, man, almost got through it without it, And I thought, because I thought I'm gonna go drive all the way down there for a DUI or something. Because I started thinking, oh my gosh, what's been in the news? What could it be? I couldn't think of what it could possibly be because. But you have to think too. It's probably something happened at least a year ago, if not longer.
True.
Unless it's a DUI or something.
And you didn't have the internet then because it was the 80s.
Yeah, you could. I mean, I could have went down to the courthouse and said, "Let me see your docket for the next 3 months," but I didn't. Oh, there you go. There he is. You see him?
I see the little ears. I don't know if you got into our circle. Dr. Spencer Reed
on the keyboard. He might lay on it. But so when I went down there.
Sorry. Angie says, I heard DUI trials are crazy these days.
Well, and they're expensive too.
They're so expensive, especially in the state of Massachusetts.
I know. It's like, who's going to fight a DUI? Just do your time and go. Used to, I don't think it's as easy to fight one now as it used to be. Because now they just, in Tennessee, if you don't take the drug test, they just take your license for a year. So you might as well take it. We have the
same here.
So you don't really have a choice. And so that was the procedure then. I've not heard it's changed. It probably has changed a little bit just because of technology, but I don't know that, like Terry said she was called for what? Like
there
a
he
week?
is.
Yeah, there he is. Like a week.
Don't be shy. There we go.
See. There he is. Say,
oh, hello, Dr. Spencer Reed. We all have pets here. We love our pets.
Oh,
Sure probably one time.
Go away. He'll probably come back though. But so I'm sure it's changed, but I don't think that has changed. I still think they do it in months long sessions.
Interesting.
Maybe it's the caseload. Maybe we don't have a lot of trials. I think though, if you had a big one come through, like Valley or whatever, where they need a really big pool, they may do an extra one. I don't know.
Interesting.
I should have found out what they did with Megan Boswell, because it was in the next county over. In our county, probably would have been about the same way, but I didn't.
Oh.
I'll make a note of that.
Okay, so you get the summons.
Mm-hmm.
And
I call every week, and I finally have to go down there. And it's actually in our county seat. It's not in the city I live in.
Okay.
But it's 10 miles away. It's not far,
Okay.
Just the next town. It's actually the oldest town in Tennessee is where our county seat is. So, and it was,
that's a fun fact.
I could, I could throw Bev a curve for an old courthouse. If she wants to get down with me about an old courthouse, I can do that. But we have wised up in East Tennessee here in Hillbilly Country, and we have a brand new justice center
with working AC.
Yes, with working AC and all the internet connections you need, and the jail is right next door, so there's not a transport problem. I mean, we got it all. But and so when I got down there, it was just like a big pool where they bring everybody in. They give you a number, and you go in there and you sit. And I didn't know anybody when I got there. I didn't see anybody that I knew, and I don't think anybody else did either, from what I remember. Nobody seemed like they were saying hi to old school friends or anything.
Interesting.
I know. The county's, I guess it's big enough for that to happen, but it just still seems weird that you wouldn't see anybody that you knew. And so they divided us up. Well, first they asked if there were any police officers or lawyers in the crowd.
Really? Specifically?
Wow. Now, I don't know that they do that now, but this is, like I said, this was in the late 80s, okay? And the people who raised their hands automatically got booted out. See you later. You couldn't tell the lady at the door. And so, and they all knew that was what would happen, because they weren't even put out about having to be there. I mean, they might have been. They didn't act like it. They were. And then they asked, I'm trying to remember, because we had a doctor, but I don't know if he stood up and said, I'm a doctor, I got surgeries tomorrow and all this stuff, but whatever, he got excused. So then they asked if anybody had hardships. No. First he said, does anybody in here have an issue with being sequestered? We haven't decided yet, but you might be sequestered. And I was thinking, do I have a problem? I could say I did, but then he's going to ask me what it is, and I can't give an answer. And there were a couple of people, and so he talked to them, and I don't know that all of them left, but some of them did. They probably had like babies at home. They were single parents or sick parents at home, that kind of thing. They would get to go. And so then they asked then they asked for hardships, and like half the people get up and start heading up that way. And I'm like, well, I don't really have one. I don't really want to be here, but I want to do it. I'm going to do my duty and all that kind of stuff. And I kind of wanted to, in a way, because I'm curious about things I've not done before. And so after about 2 people, the judge finally stood up. And he's not a very big man. He was not. He was white-haired. He looked like a judge, but he was probably about 5'7". He was 5'8", not a big man. And his voice just kind of carried. He was used to doing that. He said, if you're going to come up here and tell me that you can't do jury duty because of your job, you just go back there and sit back down.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And probably like 3/4 of the people went and sat back down.
Wow.
Yeah. And so he said, that's not a hardship. That's just not. Except one guy said, hey, I own my own business. I have no other employee. If I don't work, I don't eat. So, that man, he let him go. He let that man go. But the rest of us, we were kind of stuck there. And I think there was one or two others that had hardships that got out. But I couldn't really hear what they were because we weren't that close to him, except when he stood up and made his speech. Then after it was all settled and he had his pool he was going to choose from, or they were going to choose from, they asked if anybody knew anybody on the witness list, which was witnesses, police officers, the attorneys, the judge, anybody. And I don't know how many people raised their hand, but I did. Because I knew 2 on the potential witnesses. So
interesting.
I know. It'll make sense when I get to what the case was about, though. Okay.
Okay.
Because I was like looking around thinking, there's nobody else in here. I think there was a couple that might have known the attorneys or that kind of thing, but I don't think anybody knew the witnesses. And so they start doing. Of course, I was early, so I got an early number. So they take us in groups to the jury room. And then they bring you out and question you one at a time. And so I think I ended up being like the 3rd or 4th one they took out. And they said, who do you know? And I said, well, I know 2 of the witnesses. And I told who they were. And they said, how did you know them? And I said, well, I had them in junior high school. They were teachers of mine. And I said, in fact, I graduated with one of them's daughter. I went to school with her through 7th through graduation. So, I knew him. I didn't know him well, but I mean, the female teacher, she was art teacher, so I only had her once, but I had him several times and I knew his daughter. So, I knew him a little bit. And so when I went, they said, okay, well, we're going to keep you. And I was like, damn.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I know.
That's shocking.
I know. Okay. So I went back in there and sat down and everybody looked at me like, oh man, we thought for sure you were going to get cut.
Right.
I did too.
Who said to you, we're going to keep you? Who said that?
The judge. They had talked. So they said, we're going to keep you.
So, okay. So you didn't know if it was the prosecution or defense that.
I didn't know who the witnesses were for. They just on a list. So yeah, I didn't. So,
sorry.
I'll get back to that later. But anyway, we ended up they picked 12 jurors and an alternate. And we knew who the 12 jurors were and who the alternate was.
Only one alternate?
Well, it was just going to be a 2-day trial.
Oh, okay.
So
that makes sense.
So, I mean, I don't even know how many Lori had, but in this last one, but she wanted a bunch because they lost so many in that first one with Charles. Like they lost 2 or 3, real fast. And then they didn't. I don't think they lost any in the second one. But so they just had one. But we knew who it was because it did like Florida. The first 12 are your jurors. You got that. After that's an alternate. That's the way it's going to be. But of course, so that was how that worked out.
Okay.
So then they started the trial that day. That took most of the morning.
Well, one question for you. What was kind of like the makeup of your fellow jurors? Like women, men,
I
age,
think it was
anything?
Probably about, I was trying to remember this the other day, and I think it was about 50-50 male and female.
Okay.
I think I was the youngest, and I was about 26.
Oh, okay.
And the oldest was juror number 12, and you'll hear a lot about juror number 12.
Ooh,
he was old enough that he could have gotten out of it because of his age.
Oh, wow.
But now there was nothing wrong with his mind. I mean, his mind was there, okay? I mean, he was, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying he could have gotten out because of his age. But he was probably the oldest. And then there were some that were closer to my age. There was a woman who was close, probably in her 60s, but most of them were in their 30s and 40s, I would say.
Okay. So midlife, that sounds about.
Yeah.
Right.
But so it was a pretty good spread as far as that was concerned.
Nice. So you guys get in there, you get sworn in.
We get sworn in, and then we find out what the case is.
Yeah. So tell us about this.
It was a statutory rape case.
Oh, well,
2
that's
charges. 2 charges.
That
was the teacher and.
This is criminal. Yes, I didn't ask.
Criminal.
This is criminal. Okay, I forgot to ask if it was criminal or civil.
2 charges for 2 separate events, but the same victim. Okay.
Okay.
And if I do that, that doesn't mean I don't believe her or anything. It's just, that's what her label, the victim, the witness. I don't know what you want to call her. Plaintiff, but it's not like that. Sounds like civil. But anyway, and I thought, oh crap, I remember this now.
Oh.
I did. It all hit me. And one of the reasons it really hit me is because he was a school teacher.
Was he one of the ones you knew?
No.
Oh, okay.
Okay. He actually wasn't there when I went to school there. He came after I had moved on to high school.
Okay.
But he'd been there a while because he was a coach. He was a coach with the athletic programs and stuff. And so, or else if he was, I didn't have him. Because see, the way the junior high schools were in my city at the time, there were two, but they were on the same campus. It was strange. And then there was a common building in the middle where like band and everything was. But you were assigned a school, but you could have classes in the other school. It was so strange. So I never had him if he did teach in the other building. I didn't have him. Okay. So he could have been there, but I didn't know him. But I remember when it came out, when he was indicted, and it came out in the newspaper or on the news or something. And they were talking about it at a school board meeting. And I always paid attention to that because I had worked at the school board and administration office, my first job out of school. So I knew a lot of the people on the board and all that stuff. And I thought, and the reason I remembered it was because they were talking about firing him. Remember, this is back in the late 80s. It's before Me Too and before any of this, And one of the board members said, who I didn't really care for, but he was right about this. He said, he hadn't been to trial. He's not guilty. We can't just fire him because of an accusation. Now, nowadays, they would probably take him out of the classroom.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But yeah, because of him being a union and all that stuff, it gets a little funky. And so they didn't.
The guy's not wrong. Innocent until proven guilty.
It's right.
I mean,
it's right.
It's true.
So there's that. So he still was teaching because, and you'll find out why I know that in a few minutes. So anyway, so we found out what the trial was, and they made their opening statements, and I thought, boy, this doesn't sound good at all. Sounds bad. Of course, you're supposed to go in neutral.
Oh, yeah.
Or you're supposed to go in at innocent. And then, and this is how Peter Tragos says it, and then when the government gives their case, they're supposed to move you up to guilty. And then the defense is the one that's either going to bring you back down to reasonable doubt or leave you hanging. So it was like, oh, this doesn't sound good. I did find out later who the defense attorney was, and I knew his dad, but I didn't know him. It's just not a very big city. It's like all these connections.
Right.
Like Canton, but it's not. It's not like Canton. We're a little bit bigger than that.
That's funny.
But so they did their opening statements, and I'm thinking that we went to lunch before we really got started.
That sounds probably accurate.
Because we were sequestered. We had to be bused to, they actually bused us up in the city where I live now, which, like I said, is about 10 miles away. And took us to a cafeteria style place. We all had these big juror badges on, which was like a neon light saying, don't talk to me. Don't even look at me. Stay away. And nobody ever bothered us that I know of, any of us. I mean, I never had anybody approach me, and they all look at you like, wonder what's going on down in Jonesboro.
Wait, so you were sequestered from the very beginning of the trial?
Yeah.
Okay.
They told us you're going to be sequestered for the duration. But we didn't really know how long it was going to be, but they told us it would just be a few days.
Oh, okay.
It depended on how things went, So this was like a Tuesday, Monday or Tuesday, because we were done by Friday or Thursday. We were done by Thursday. So I'm thinking it was Thursday. But at the time, 2 nights, it doesn't sound like a lot, but it was. I mean, I can't imagine even doing a trial for 30 days, much less some of these are sequestered for that. Like in Idaho, not Idaho, but
Richard Allen.
Richard Allen.
In Indiana,
Oh, that would be
for like
bad.
a whole 6 weeks or something.
I know. Yeah, it's not like jury duty. That was fun. But so after we had lunch and they started presenting their cases, they didn't end up calling the 2 witnesses that I knew. So I think that was one reason I got kept. Because they were going to be state witnesses, but the defense objected, and I think they were just going to be hearsay witnesses.
Okay.
You know,
Character.
what she told, what the girl, either character or what the girl told them happened. That's hearsay.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? It wasn't even a declaration. Because they will let people in that heard the initial declaration of a rape or assault or whatever, but it wasn't even that, or at least it wasn't at the time.
Okay.
And so they really only had a police officer came in and a girl.
Okay.
The police officer came in because, and there may have been some more, but these are the only ones I remember, because they had wired her up and sent her into his classroom. That's how I knew he was still teaching.
Oh, like use her as like a plant?
Try to get a confession out of him.
A child?
Yeah. Yes, a child. She's like 13, 14. Yes.
Okay, that makes me uncomfortable. I'm sorry, but like
it'd be uncomfortable too.
To somebody that might be a predator.
I know, and now they wouldn't do that now, not with a child.
No, that's wild.
I know.
Okay.
But the first thing you hear him say when she walked in, I mean, they gave us a transcript. The defense fought it, said this is what they think it says, and he's in the judge's gonna let it in. But then when the defense replayed some parts of it for us, they had their own transcript. So, and the judge told us the transcript's not the evidence, the recording is. So you have to go by what you hear.
That's why they don't usually do transcriptions.
I know. So that's why. So that kind of bothered me because I thought, well, yeah, this is exactly what it says. And then when I got the defensive transcript, I said, yeah, that's exactly what it is. So it was kind of like the waterfall video where you can make it be, it's so blurry, you can make it be however you want it to be, whatever your side needs to say. It was kind of like that. But you could hear him say, when she came in, he said, first thing he said was, what are you doing in here? You're not supposed to be in here. You're not supposed to be around me. You're going to get me in trouble. And you could hear him, because you could hear his voice fading away, him moving away from her and her coming at him. And I can't that's all. Yeah, this is a child.
This is not the girl that he's accused of.
Yes.
The victim. It is the victim.
It is the victim.
Oh.
Yes.
What?
It is the 13, 14-year-old victim.
Okay.
I know. And so, I mean, I was uncomfortable. I was like, this is bad. This is really bad. But he never said anything. He just kept doing this. Why are you here? You're going to get me in trouble. And kind of thing. And he would say things like, why are you accusing me of this? Nothing's happened. You know, you're going to get me in trouble. And so it was like, he never said anything. It's almost like, why did you bother playing this?
Yeah.
And my only reason is because they had to turn it over in discovery, and they knew that the defense would, so they're going to put their spin on it first. And so then we heard that, and then she testified. The girl got up there and testified, and she sounded really good. I mean, she gave the facts and everything, the two events when it happened.
Which must be scary as a 13 or 14
It was, and the thing is that unless her mother, her parents, had a single mom and a professional woman. This girl was left alone. That kind of figured into some of our thinking. But she was left alone a lot. She was a latchkey kid. And I was too, so I'm not throwing any stones on that.
It was
sometimes
80s.
It's the best thing for you because you learn how to function on your own, and take care of yourself. But she didn't have any siblings, and so she probably did get lonely and that kind of thing. But she had a CASA with her who was sitting with her at the trial, sitting beside of her in court. So she had her representative, but if her mother was there, she didn't sit with her.
Oh.
It was only that one person. And her mother may have been in the back somewhere. I don't know.
Maybe her daughter just didn't want to hear her there to hear it, or,
Yeah, so we don't know, because that's something we were never told. We couldn't know that. And I've never even bothered to try to find out because it didn't really matter.
Yeah.
To me. I mean, we thought it was curious their mom wasn't there, but then we thought, well, she could be in the back because there was people there watching. We don't know. We didn't know. And so she testified, and she said she had a calendar. It was a lot fancier than this, just a regular calendar where she had notes on. And on one of the dates, she had like a big heart colored in. And that was like the day it happened.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, okay, the first one, because it supposedly happened twice. or he's accused of twice. Allegedly, that's probably the better word to use. Allegedly happened twice. And so it looked like, that's like, because they passed the calendar down, we all got to touch it and hold it and everything. And it wasn't in a bag. It wasn't even like in a Ziploc bag or anything. It's freaking me out now that I think about it,
Right.
But, somebody could spit on it or something. And it looked like, man, that's pretty bad. She's recorded all this and stuff. And then and I can't, my days are all starting. I'm going to tell you about the testimony, and then I'll tell you about the other stuff.
That's fine.
Okay. And then, so that was pretty much it for her. And there may have been other people, but I can't remember who they were. Basically, it was her word and whatever law enforcement was there kind of thing. And then he took the stand and his own defense.
Well, you kind of have to in this situation.
Well, you kind of had to in this situation.
Yeah.
And the thing was, she described the first time it happens was at her house, allegedly. Okay. Now, she's 13-year-old. He drove her home from school, whatever. The second time was supposedly at his apartment that he shared with his wife and his college-age daughter.
Oh, okay.
Now, remember, this is an apartment, not a house.
Okay.
Which means there are other apartments around. So that was a factor. But he said, I didn't do it, basically, I mean, it was the shaggy defense, but I don't know what else you can say when you're accused of that. Yeah. Basically, except he told he'd never been to her, he was refuting everything she said, never been to her house, didn't even know where she lived. And she described his apartment, the living room, because she said he just snuck her in real fast into the living room with a coat over her head at an apartment complex. Okay. And then it was in the living room where it happened. And then he snuck her back out. That's basically what she said happened. And she described the living area. And so his defense attorney comes up and he's got a photograph. And the apartment was built back like in the 70s and 80s when they used sliding glass doors as your entrance door instead of an entry door. And it had the vertical blinds, because I can still remember in my mind's eye what it looked like. And he had a picture of it from the outside looking into that living room. And he said, that's what she described to you. And so he's making it like, and I think he actually, she walked over or had a friend drive her over or whatever, because she had a thing for him. She's developed a crush on him is what this is. She's got a schoolgirl crush on her teacher because he paid attention to her. And she's a lonely girl. That was the defense, basically. And so it does look like that living room. She couldn't describe the bathroom. She couldn't describe the kitchen. She couldn't describe anything else in that apartment except for that living room. Now, that's not saying that that's not the only place he took her. I mean, that is the only place he took her. But she couldn't even say where the bathroom was. She couldn't even say where it was in the apartment. So that's starting to be the reasonable doubt's starting to kick in with that. And then his daughter got up. She's an alibi for him for his timeline on the first charge. And
she's in college, right? Okay.
She's in college preparing for her final exams.
Wow. Okay.
Now, did you go to college?
Well, for like a year and a half, but I went to art school. So.
Well, did you have final exams?
I went to art school.
Okay. Well, that's okay. But I went to college and I hadn't been out of college that long. And I said, well, and there were a couple that weren't that much older than me either. Actually, our foreman was probably only about 3 or 4 years older than me. And he remembered college too. And it's like, you remember, what time it is, when I got to turn in my exam, how long it's going to take me to get there from my house, because she lived across town from the university over here. And so she told what time he got home. Oh, so she lived at home. She lived at home. Even though she was in school. Okay. Yeah, she lived at home because the apartments, I mean, it's just across town. It's right, but like, was she just at home on break or something? But she lived there full time. Right. She was living there working on a project that she had to turn in that night. So she knew what time it was. We all felt like she knew what time it was he got home, because she knew how much time she had to get this done, get across campus, find a place to park, how much time she had to turn it in. She knew how long all of that would take her. So we felt like she was aware of what time it was. Okay. Even if, you know what I'm saying? So we felt like she knew what time he got home. And so that kind of gave him an alibi for the first charge. And there's no alibi like that, independent alibi, or I know it's his daughter, but we all felt like she was being honest. He doesn't have any of that for the second charge. just the photograph that she could have seen inside his window, inside his living room at any time.
Okay.
So that was basically all the testimony.
Just to clarify, the daughter is there for the alibi of him going to the girl's house.
Right.
But there was no alibi for the girl being at his house. Right? Okay.
Right.
Okay. Just want to make sure I'm following.
You're following. I know I may be talking too fast.
No, you're good.
I should have told you to slow me down.
No, you're totally fine.
I don't have Trina's problem. Just put it that way. I'm not a slow talker.
That's okay.
But so that was where we were on the evidence. And so before we get to the deliberations, I will tell you a little bit about what we had to do for the sequestration part. Just to break things up and leave the excitement for the end. So none of us had clothes packed. Nobody packs a go bag when you're going to jury duty. And so they, somebody's going to have to bring your stuff. And I said, well, there's nobody to bring me stuff because my husband at the time, he was out of town with the Naval Reserves. He was like in New Jersey or somewhere. I had nobody to bring me anything. There was like 3 others that were in the same boat as me for whatever reason. There was nobody to bring something to us. So they said, okay, that's fine. Everybody else had called family and there's somebody listening to you make this phone call.
I'm sure.
Yeah. There's somebody standing right beside of you while you make this phone. And this was back in, there was none of these around. It was landline on the cord. Okay. You had to make the phone call on the cord. And there weren't even cordless. I mean, there were in some places, but not at the courthouse. Mm-hmm. And you had to call whoever, bring me this, bring me that, whatever they needed. And I remember standing there when we were getting ready. Some of us had to go be driven around the county. There was like 4 of us had to be driven around the county by one of the deputies. He was the in charge guy. Okay. To all our houses to get our stuff.
Like a little field trip carpool.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. So we knew where 3 other jurors lived anyway. I couldn't tell you who they were now. But so I remember this one girl, she was probably only about 30 and she was pregnant. So that could have got her out. I think, if she'd wanted to.
Well, it was only 2 days, I guess.
But she had 3 kids at home.
Oh, wow.
She had 3. Yeah, she was pregnant with her 4th child at about age 30, 31.
And they kept her there? That's okay.
She didn't ask to be let go. She could have gotten out of it.
Maybe she was just like, I just need to be somewhere else other than home.
Yeah, just for 2 days, I'll take it. Yeah.
I'm tired and I just need a break.
And maybe it's time for the husband to see what I put up with for 3 days, right? So he brought her. I remember he brought her bag and had the little kids with him, and they were hugging on her like they weren't ever going to see her again. It was so sweet, but she was a wreck. Because I didn't have kids at the time, so I thought, well, how sweet that is. I didn't realize how jerky that would really be. But so they did, and I think I was one of the last ones they drove because they went to the house. No, I might have been the first because I was the furthest away because I was in the city. Everybody else was out in the county. But when we got to my house, the deputy said, "No, there's nobody in there for you to talk to." I said, "No, just my 2 cats, and I won't tell them anything. I promise." So he said, "Don't make any phone calls," So I didn't call anybody, Jen McCabe. It can be done. So I ran in, I cleaned out the litter box real quick and made sure the cats had food and water. And then I grabbed what I needed for the night and got back out in the car. And then we drove around. Well, no, actually, I probably was one of the last ones because actually the hotel was in Johnson City where I live. So I was closest to the hotel. And so we went to the hotel. By the time we got there, it was like 10:30, 11 o'clock at night.
Oh, wow.
And so the other people were already there.
Mm-hmm.
But we weren't. And so we got to go get to our rooms. And you're spending the night with a stranger, which is very strange anyway. And then the deputy.
Did you guys get a pick who you shared a room with? Or
no, but it was somebody of the same gender.
Okay.
So,
I would assume.
But actually, my roommate was quite pleasant. She was probably about 35, 36. And she was a married woman. She was very smart and she was fun to be around and all that. But the deputy came into our room and he picked up that phone on the cord and he unscrewed it and he took out the mouthpiece or whichever part it is. So
the receiver.
Yes, you can't make the phone call. You can't make any phone calls. And he says, don't watch TV. case the news comes on.
I was going to say, this is the 80s. There's probably like 3 channels
Exactly
on the TV with the antenna.
Because they're not going to pay for HBO for a jury. You know what I'm saying? It's not going to happen. We didn't have HBO back then, but no. So we were like, what are we going to talk about? We're strangers. We just took showers and went to bed.
Yeah.
And then got up, had breakfast, and went back and had court all day. And that night, and then we had the second night, we had to do the same thing. Had to go around and get everybody's clothes and come back after the second night and have the trial the third day when they did their closings. And when we went to lunch, me and my roommate, we walked over to the deputy and said, can we ask you a question? He said, what? Did somebody talk to you? Tell me who it was. Because he was like freaking out. And I was like, no, just a question. Are we going to have to stay tonight? And he said, well, let me put it to you this way. I didn't pack my bag. And so I thought, we're going home tonight. All right. I'm in good shape. And so as soon as we got back, they were about done. We deliberated. Probably went back about 3 or 4 because they brought us supper in. I remember that. And of course, we did the whole, when you go to the bathroom and you have to stop. And I can't remember because I didn't smoke, so it didn't matter to me. And I can't remember if they had smoke breaks or what they did for people who smoke. They probably did, but I just don't remember.
I mean, it was the 80s. They probably just did it in the jury room.
Well, they may, they may have, or they may not. They may have said, you got to go out in this room over here kind of thing. Probably. I don't remember. Because, it was like back then, they didn't give a hoot. People were smoking. But then so when we started, we were probably at about, by the time we got finished, and I knew where I stood. I said, there's just too much reasonable doubt here for me. For me, that's where I was. I mean, I felt sorry for her because I can't imagine what it was like for her to get up there and say all this stuff that happened. Of course, there wasn't a lot of details, but you know what I'm saying? Still scary.
Yeah.
And she's accusing a grown man of doing something, and that's scary in itself. And then, but I was like, it just hadn't proved it to me yet. And we were probably started out at about 8-4.
Okay. 8 guilty or not guilty? I'm sorry.
Not guilty.
8 not guilty.
8 reasonable doubt. You see what I'm saying?
Okay.
We got this reasonable doubt thing going. But 2 of the 4 were probably more of, they're not convinced. They were more, what you'd say on the fence, but if you're on the fence, then you have to vote not guilty. But they wanted to talk. So we talked about things, and we finally got to 10-2. And the 2 that were the old man, who, by the way, fell asleep half the time. Oh. And the alternate who he was sitting beside, who didn't get to deliberate, and we really wanted to keep him because he was so cool. He kept elbowing the guy, waking him up. I mean, I bet you he slept through half the testimony.
This was Juror 12, right?
12, yes. The elderly man. The elder man, Juror 12. And so him and the woman who was like in her 60s, probably mid-60s. She's a very put-together woman. I mean, she's a professional. I mean, she was, they were both smart people. I mean, they both were. And they were like, I just can't let him go. And so we said, okay, well, let's talk about charge 1 and the daughter alibi. Okay. And so we kind of talked about that with the timeline, and me and the guy who was the foreman, who hadn't been out of college very long, and his wife hadn't been out of college very long, and a couple of others that were kind of younger. Their kids were in college. They said, because, she's going to know what time it is. I know she's his daughter. I get that part. But she's going to be aware of the time. And if she's working on a project and she knows it's 4:00 because she's got to be there at 7 or 6 or whatever time it was, and she'll know when he got home. And so they were like, okay, we'll vote. We're not guilty on this one. So we got one out of the way.
Oh, okay.
All right. And so then we're talking about the other one. And that's where we spent most of our time.
This was the one where she was allegedly taken to his home.
Right.
Right.
Now, see, the thing that got me was she says he took her in with a coat over her head. Now, that part doesn't surprise me if it's really true. He's trying to hide who it is. But they are in an apartment complex. There are 2 apartment complexes. Now, I'm not talking huge 700 unit apartment complexes. They probably have about 20, 25 each, but they're back to back. So that's 50 units. And that's people, he's got neighbors that know him, know his wife, know his daughter. Of course, they didn't have anybody there to say, well, I saw him that day and I didn't see anybody with him. So, you know, I mean,
that's true.
That can go either way. But you'd think you wouldn't be inclined to take somebody to your house knowing that you've got a neighbor right next door. You know what I'm saying? Not like a house, but their doors.
I mean, people have done stupider things, though.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. There's no doubt about that.
I mean,
there's no doubt. Thinking they can get away with everything. Yeah. But it's
I would be it would be hard to believe that somebody would take a child to do that to their own home where their wife is, their daughter is, where people could see them. And but it could be, but that's reasonable doubt, right?
See, that was that was my doubt. And the fact that she could only describe the living area, if she could have described the bathroom, you know what I'm saying? Like she went to the bathroom while she was there and she could have described it. That would have been like, well, she's been further than that living room. You know, so she's been in that apartment. That would have went her way. But
question, do you remember how long a period of time they supposedly
like between these two events?
No, how much time in his apartment that she allegedly would have spent time in?
Like half hour at the most. Just in and out kind of a thing. It wasn't like she was there all day or he snuck her in like after school because you remember he's a school teacher. And then he took her home. It's like he gave her a ride home, but we're making a detour kind of thing. That's kind of what it was. Okay. And so the defense tried to present it as he was an English teacher. And I think she had a journal and she did journaling and she did writing, creative writing and stuff. And they said he paid attention to her by, you know, complimenting her writing and encouraging her and stuff. And she just got a fixation. Now, I don't, you know, that was the defense part of it. And kind of in a way I could see it because she was a home alone. She seemed to be emotionally neglected by her mother. She wasn't. Now I know where she lived, the neighborhood. I don't know the house, but in the neighborhood. And it was a nice one. You know what I'm saying? Nice one when I grew up in. And actually it was just like when I was in school where the rich kids lived. But I'm not saying her mom was rich. She could have been renting. You know what I mean? So, but that's just where they lived. But I knew it was a nice enough place that the mother could at least afford to rent it. So she wasn't, materialistically, she wasn't neglected. But that don't mean she wasn't emotionally neglected.
Well, and being the only child left at home a lot. I mean, that's a lot. It really is.
That's what because her mother, it wasn't like she was, and I'm not saying this to put anybody down, a waitress. She was a professional woman who probably had a very demanding job with extra hours and responsibilities and things like
that.
And
a single mom.
And a single mom in the 80s. So, I mean, there's a lot, there's a lot there. And so that's how the 10 of us were like, there's just too much reasonable doubt. And then the 2 were like, I can't let him go. And so we went out to the judge and the foreman told him we were hung. And he said, well, it's too quick for me to declare a hung jury. And I don't think there's an Allen charge in Tennessee. We didn't get anything official. Just go back in there and try again. Okay. And so we tried for a little bit longer. And he's like, he said, and this is his words, because they stuck with me. I feel like he's done something at some time, and I just can't let him go. Oh. And that woman said, that's how I feel. And so we're like, okay, now let's look at the jury instructions. And we kind of read them. And what it says is you're deciding on these two charges. Something you might think happened somewhere else. That's how I took it. And they kept saying, no, he said we could use our own common sense and our own judgment from personal experience. And he did say that. And so we said, oh, let's send a note out to the judge asking him for if he can read us the instruction, go over the instructions with us one more time. Not a specific instruction. All right. And so
were you not allowed to take those back with you?
Yeah, but we wanted to. I know we had, but we wanted him to explain because you're supposed to go by what you hear.
Right.
And so they said no. So I was like, damn it. So I knew how all those jurors felt when when Bev sent back the note, I can't give you that
Nope.
answer, or you're the finder of fact, because I was like, oh, we did the same thing. And I understand what it's like to get that no, you really want to get an answer to.
How many hours at this point had you guys been deliberating? Do you recall?
I'm trying to remember. It was probably about 10:30 or 11. And they let us go to that night. We said, we want to stay because we're going to get this done. We knew we had one charge done. We had this other one. It was either going to happen or it wasn't. We knew it. Because none of the not guilty were going to change. We knew that. So we were trying to persuade the other two. And they said, no, I'm not going to change my vote. And so at the time I thought, you're just being stubborn. But now I get it. Now, because I'm not going to, I'd be the hung juror. I'd be the one. If I was the one, I'd be the one. If I was convinced.
Yeah.
It'd be 11-1. If I'm not going to send somebody to prison, or I'm not going to let somebody off, if I'm convinced, we'll let them try it again later. And that was kind of what, and they were older, so that might be in what their mindset was. They knew they could try again. And so we went up to the judge and said, we got one and we're hung on the other. And he said, is any amount of discussion going to change it? And the foreman said, no, it's not going to change. And so we had one charge of acquittal and one hung jury.
Wow.
Mistrial on the second.
Right. Wow.
So I know split verdicts can happen, Bev.
Right.
So that was like
personal experience.
Yeah, it says last year I was freaking out. I said, that can happen. It can happen. But of course, state laws have different things.
That's true. That's true.
Different things.
How were maybe some of the other jurors upset about the other two? I mean, I don't like what they said. I'll be honest. I feel like something sometime happened. Like that's not enough for me either. But I do understand like people being like, no, you're not gonna.
Not just gonna let it go. And
I get it.
So no, it didn't make me mad. It was like, but that's not what we're supposed to be here for.
Right.
We're supposed to decide on these two things. I was like, black and white, black and white, black and white. But now, I mean, it is black and white, but there is also a little gray, just a little bit, on reasonable doubt, which is what I had.
Yeah. Because just because you find a reasonable doubt does not mean that you believe that person is innocent. I think a lot of people don't. Yeah. I think a lot of people think, oh, there's reasonable doubt. It's just because the state didn't prove it. It doesn't mean that you think they're actually factually innocent.
Right. A lot of people think it means you're saying that they didn't do it when all you're really saying is the state didn't prove they did it. And so blame them, not me. Don't blame the jury.
Yeah.
So
now, how did anybody feel? Because I imagine, as we read from one of the jurors from Karen Reed earlier today on Couch Court, they did say how they felt very sorry for John's family, doing the verdict they had to do. Like, this is a younger girl. I mean, was that hard?
Yeah, we all felt sorry for her. That was one of the things we talked about because we thought that she was lonely. And she may have said something to somebody. You know what I'm saying? Like maybe she said something to a teacher or an adult. And they took it a different way. And it just ran away from her and she couldn't stop it. We thought that was possible because 13, 14-year-old and people start telling you something happened, then maybe it did happen. And I'm just trying to ignore it, or I'm trying to block it, or I'm trying to make it less than it was because I don't want to face it. So no, we all had a lot of sympathy. I still do to this day. And I don't know. I can't remember her name. I can remember his name. And I actually looked him up to see what happened to him. And he died in 21.
Oh.
They had moved to Greenville, South Carolina.
Okay.
And he died in COVID restrictions. And so he just had a family private ceremony. I don't know if it's the only reason they had a private family ceremony, because here's the kicker. About less than a week later, because this probably was Thursday night, probably Monday or Tuesday, it was on the news that he pled guilty to 2 counts of perjury. It was a plea. It was a plea. It's because he said they were going to try him again for that charge. Okay.
Okay.
And he said he didn't have any money for a lawyer. He'd lost his job by that time.
Because it's hard to charge somebody for perjury. Like, it is hard.
Well, he pled to it, so there was no charging for it. Okay.
Right.
And since there were 2 counts, they said he lied on both times when he was on the stand. That's why it was 2 charges. And he said, I can't put my family through this again because it's been like 3 years of hell so far. And it'll be at least another year. And so he did. Well, he got sentenced to 4 because it was 2 years for each count. But I don't think he served. I think he only served like a year and a half or something.
Oh, wow. Too, and now that we watch a lot of trials and stuff, I mean, we even know that there's a lot of evidence that gets left out of court because it doesn't meet the bar to be evidence. Like there could have been.
Well, see, that's why I wonder about those 2 witnesses that I knew. I mean, I didn't know them well. It wasn't like I was buddies or anything with them, but I knew them, and you could see, well, since they were teachers of mine, I might think they have some. I have some respect for them and their judgment. You know what I'm saying? But so I always wondered what they were going to say. Yeah. What they were there for. I've always wondered that. What were they there for? And I have wondered what happened to her after that at school.
Oh, yeah.
Because, even though she was protected by law, all the kids knew who she was. You knew that. And so I don't know if she changed schools, her mother moved to another city, because I think she worked in a neighboring city and they might have moved. I don't know whatever happened to her.
I'm still blown away that they used her as like an informant.
I know. I didn't like that. I was uncomfortable with that back then. And I was just like, because I was only like 26.
Yeah.
And I was like, why are they sending her? She's a kid. Why are they sending her in there for that?
Right.
They did. They wired her up and sent her into his classroom.
That's, I don't like it. I don't like it at all. Because then, okay, let's say that is what happened. You're just like literally setting her up again to potentially be, because it's the 80s, right? So what, it was just was somebody going to come in and save her? Like, I don't know.
Well, see, this way, and it wasn't even like during like changing classes or anything. It was like before school started, or you know what I'm saying? Before people were getting there, kind of thing. She just walked in his classroom, and he's like, and you could tell he was trying to get away from her because his voice kept fading away. He was scared to hell. If I was him, it scared me too. I would have left my classroom, and I think that's what he was trying to do. She stayed between him and the door.
Oh,
that's what they said. That's what they told us. I mean, that's what the DA told us. She was to keep him from leaving. I mean, that's dangerous to me.
That's
even though she was
dangerous,
and
situation.
He didn't know she was recording him at that time. The defendant didn't. The defendant didn't know she had a recording on her. But he knew
that she
wasn't supposed to be there. She was not supposed to be around him.
Right, but he knew the person that was accusing him, I guess is what I'm
saying. Oh, yeah. He knew her. Yeah, but he just didn't know she was wired up at that time. He may have suspected it. But how did if he didn't know, how do you know he's not going to hurt her?
Yeah. And it's just icky all around. To put that on a child is weird. And I don't know if that was necessary.
Especially if she's traumatized, and I'm not saying she wasn't. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? If it really happened, like you said, then she's been traumatized, and you're going to send her in there? No. I don't think so.
That was weird.
Yeah.
Wow. What a wild story.
It was an adventure. Just 2 nights sequestered, but that's why whenever I hear that word, I'm like, oh, bad.
Did they do anything for you guys when you were sequestered? Like, did they at least give you movies? Maybe like have a movie night.
We were only there 2 nights. There 2 nights. So I mean, but we didn't have the picnic or the birthday party like they did in jury duty. Yeah, we didn't do that. No birthday parties.
I like that a lot. Yeah. Oh my goodness. So would you want to serve on a jury again?
Yeah, I'd do it.
Yeah.
And this time I'd be smarter too. I mean, I would understand the job better. Not that I wasn't smart before, but I would understand. And I would, even at just 26 and being the youngest one, I was not one that people could push around. They weren't going to convince me to put somebody in prison. And now I would definitely be, if it was 11-1 and I was the only one for not guilty, I would be the only one. I would tell them, we'll be here till next Christmas. You're not changing my vote. I'm not sending somebody to prison because I haven't been convinced.
Mm-hmm.
I have too much reasonable doubt kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, and I'm sure in the 80s too, with a case like that, there's not a lot of kind of evidence that we might have today,
Right.
Especially back then, whether or not it happened. But oh man, that would be tough.
Yeah, I mean, they would have probably gone into his place to look for her DNA, maybe somewhere. I don't know how much after being all this happened, it came out. I can't remember.
Mm-hmm.
But there may have been touch DNA there. Of course,
Mm-hmm.
then you're going to have to prove when it happened. But it just proved she would be in there.
Right.
That helps her case.
That's true. And that's true.
The same as his DNA at her house. It helps her case.
Well, you said she journaled a lot. Did they bring in any of her journal entries?
I was trying to remember that. It seemed like they had some diary entries, yeah. But it kind of flowed with her calendar. I remember the calendar more because I remember thinking, wow, that's pretty good. And then I thought later, but no, wait a minute. I don't know when she wrote those notes on that calendar.
Mm-hmm.
She could have done it this morning. I mean, I knew she didn't do it that morning, but
right.
I'm saying it could have been done after the fact. It could have been done a year after. I don't know when it happened.
And see, that's the thing, things like that too, that I'm like, it's irrelevant. That calendar's irrelevant at this point, like it just,
I mean, because it's in a journal.
Which is such a hard thing to say, because you feel like an a-hole.
I know. I feel like that calendar, it could very well be everything to her. And it's like, it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. Wow. So. What a wild story that is.
Yeah. For like 2 whole days of trial and 2 nights. It was crazy. So I can't imagine what these people that have these 33-day trials or 40-day trials or sequestered for 6 weeks.
Did you stay in touch with anyone from jury duty?
I might now, but back then we didn't have the cell phones. You couldn't get people's numbers and do group texts and all that kind of stuff like you can now.
And you got phone books.
A lot harder. Huh?
You got phone books.
Yeah, phone book that big.
I do remember those. I think they sometimes do like white pages ones around here.
And they're usually business though, aren't they?
Yeah, they're usually like small white page business.
Yeah. It's like, who does that anymore? I just go online and I'll look it up.
Who are you making these for? I don't know. Lady in Gray, thank you so much for sharing your experience today. That was a great insight. I think it's very interesting to listen to everyone's experiences and the different kinds of juries are on, trial-wise, jurisdiction.
Yeah, that's
all that.
Yeah, I think sometimes I'm amazed at what other jurisdictions do. So,
yeah. Well, it sounded like you had a pretty reasonable.
Yeah, it wasn't crazy. The judge was good. He was firm. I mean, he was a no-nonsense judge, but he was also not a jerk. he was, he was elected. Well, he was appointed, and then he was retained. That's how Tennessee does it. They get appointed. Now, they can be elected initially, but a lot of times they're appointed by, the commission or governor or whatever. But we have elections where they have to be retained or replaced, and he was always retained until he retired.
We vote here for judges as well.
We don't. We have voted judges out, and we've had judges who didn't run again because they knew they'd be voted out, and so they decided they didn't want the embarrassment. So, being voted out.
Not best case, but she's lucky.
I know.
She's lucky.
I know.
Oh, well, thank you so much for coming on here. You guys, Lady in Gray, tell them that I'm nice.
She's very nice, comfortable,
and chill.
She lets you bring your beverage and your cat. So
that's right,
or your dog.
Yeah. So if any of you guys have been on a jury, or you were a witness in a case, or I don't know, maybe you were in law enforcement, or I don't know, we can talk about whatever you want. But if you guys want to come on Couch Confessions with Llama, we do have a little form that you can fill out, and then we'll be in contact with you about that, because I would love, as I said, I love hearing people's stories about really anything, but particularly being in trials and things like that. I did get asked to do jury, like I had to report for a whole week, and I never got called to do voir dire. I was very upset and annoyed about it, but ours was only for a week. I can't imagine being on call for like 3 months. So that's something.
So I don't know that they still do it that way. I think they do because nobody's told me they haven't, but they may not. Since we have technology now, and it's a lot easier to contact people for them. It may have been a thing of we need to have these people on call calling in our, it was an automated line telling them when to call back. Yeah. Now they probably send you a text, or I don't know how it works, or an email. Or
well,
whatever.
I live in a really big city, so they do have like a lot of cases going on at one time. You know, so they just have to every week they call. I think they call hundreds of people every week.
Sure they do. I'm sure they do. I mean, we have
very cool,
we might have 2 courtrooms at the same time, but they're, like I said, they're not any, they're DUIs or burglary or whatever. They're not any, we don't have big, huge trials around here. If we do, it's like, oh no, we don't want that trial here. Like Megan Boswell, next county over.
Well, again, the weight of having to make those decisions, it kind of sucks. It kind of sucks. And it's hard.
It is hard, but I still think that even though we have problems, in which we saw with Karen Reed, our justice system isn't perfect, but it's still better than others because, in Canada, the government could appeal her not guilty.
What?
Yeah, they can appeal that acquittal in Canada.
I'm fascinated by the way,
that's what
any of you are
Ian Runkle told me.
If any of you are in another country and you want to come on here to tell me how this works in your country, I will absolutely put you on, and I would love to hear about it. And I'm fascinated about that.
Exactly. And if I'm wrong about that, then I will say I'm wrong about that. But I believe that Ian Runkle mentioned that one time on his show. So.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
That to me is scary. That's because that's like they could come after you forever, the rest of your entire life. Despite
being found not guilty.
Yes.
Astonishing. Wow. Well, is there anything you want to say to everyone watching? Any sign off you have?
No, I just want Buffy. I want to hear Buffy. Didn't she have court? I mean, wasn't she on the jury too?
Look at that peer pressure. I love it.
Peer pressure. We're all about it here. We're all about the peer pressure.
Quite a few people on our staff have served on juries.
Right.
Another one has already got a jury summons for.
Oh, that's right.
3 months, I think, this fall, or something like that.
You have that one pre-booked,
the second time. The second time since I've known her that she's gotten a jury summons, which is interesting.
I got summoned the immediate term after I served. But since I'd served, I didn't have to go. But I just called him up and said, I just got off. I don't have to come back. And it's, no, we're going to mark you off. And so I think it was like for 2 years or something, but I've never gotten another summons. So.
Oh, interesting. All right. So we all want to see Buffy on the next one. Just saying. The chat has spoken. What are we going to do? Say no, Buffy? Come on, Demi.
Exactly.
Well, Lady in Gray, thank you again for coming on. I appreciate it. Thank you for sharing your story with everyone.
You're welcome.
I think it was very insightful, and especially like a case like that, it's hard. I think for that kind of topic of feeling like if it was right or wrong, but to me, it sounds like you guys kind of made the best decision you could with what you got.
Yeah, we did, because it was really her versus him on their words, and so it wasn't proven enough for me. I couldn't do it.
I mean, that's the thing, right? People have to live with the decision, like whatever it may be. Like you got to live with that. So
exactly.
I know I would be that way too. But anyway, thank you again so much for being on Couch Confessions. I appreciate it. And let's see, I'll be back Monday, 8:30 a.m. for what? I don't know. It's going to be a mystery week. I don't know. I got a lot of stuff to plan and do this weekend to figure out what we're going to do. But I'll be there because I love hanging out with y'all. But until then, go forth and be amazing. Bye, everybody.